and I found her right after her 17th birthday, and what I found was her in foster care. And she had been taken away from her adoptive parents. She was in an extremely abusive situation, and she was taken away from them when she was 14. And God, you know, it's been how many years, and I still cry about this stuff. It's just always with me. But I, you know, was in touch with her social worker, and she had a court-appointed attorney, and she was living in Maryland, and I kind of brought her out to California for a visit without permission to do that. I'd been told I couldn't do it, but I did it anyway. I bought her a round-trip ticket, but when I saw the foster home that she was living in and the conditions she was living in, it was one of those nightmare foster homes that you hear about. It was awful. There was no way I could have physically taken her to an airport and put her on a plane and sent her back there. I just couldn't do it. And what the attorney told me was, you know, send your daughter a one-way ticket, get her into California, call her social worker, tell her she ran away, and to deal with it, you're not sending her back. And I said, well, that's step one. Check. So anyways, that's exactly what we did. We just said she ran away and called me from the airport when she got to Los Angeles. I eventually became her foster mom, and for her so she could stay in my home, you know, legally, which was a whole other set of circumstances. So she had a really, when she turned 18, she got they gave her records from the time she was in foster care, and it was really hard to read. It was really, really difficult, all the stuff that she went through, and more stuff than she had even told me about. So that perfect family that I was promised, and Elise and I were talking, the one thing I had control over back then was what religion my child would be. And I was Catholic, so I was determined that my child would have a Catholic family, because it was the only thing I had control over. And then when I found my daughter, it turned out that her adoptive parents were Jehovah's Witness, which is a little different from Catholic. So I don't want to offend anybody, you know, in their religion, but my daughter never celebrated a birthday. She never had a birthday party. She never celebrated Christmas. So all those events, when I would think about her, oh, I wonder what she's doing today, I wonder what Santa Claus brought that, and she never had any of that. So that was not what I wanted. That was not what I was promised. So anyways, when my younger daughter was about 12, I started having like these same gut feelings that something's up. And I just said, okay, this time I'm not ignoring them. Open adoption was not an option I was with Children's Home Society that time. It was not an option. It was something that was being talked about. This was in 1979. Some places were doing it, but it wasn't a proven thing. They weren't going that route. The parents that adopted my daughter had 2 children of their own. They had adopted 2 hard to place children. My children are biracial, so that's hard to place. And so they were thinking about adopting a 3rd, and they were thinking about adopting maybe a 3-year-old out of foster care. And when they heard about my daughter, they went home and said, there's a baby. What do you guys think about the baby? Well, the girls, their biological daughters were young teenagers, and they were thrilled to have like a baby, you know. So, and they were, you know, I was told that if they were doing open adoptions, this would be an open adoption, because that's just the way this family was. So when I searched for my daughter when she was 12 years old, she had just turned 13 when I found her. I kind of sat on that information for a couple of months, and finally wrote a letter to her parents, explained who I was, and that I just had this gut feeling that I needed to contact them, and however they wanted to handle it, you know, I would leave it up to them. And but I had to contact them and let them know where I was and what was going on. And sure enough, this would have been an open adoption because that's what we did. My daughter was going to therapy at the time. She was slightly suicidal and really not going through a lot of issues of abandonment, and her parents were wise enough to understand that it wasn't something they were doing wrong, and they knew enough about adoption issues that they took her to the right therapist who specialized in, adoption issues. And so we waited a few months before we told her I was back in the picture, and then we met on Halloween. We just celebrated our 20th anniversary on Halloween of meeting, and she's 33 now, and that experience has just been the total opposite of what my oldest daughter went through. I mean, we totally opened up the adoption. She would come and spend the weekends with me from the get-go. They live in San Diego, and I would go down there for the weekend. She would come up here. My son moved to San Diego at one point after we'd been reunited about 2 or 3 years, and he lived with them for a few months until he found a job and found a place. I mean, we just really, truly are one big happy family. So I have these two really opposite experiences with adoption. And but again, the reality of my 12-year-old, 13-year-old daughter being suicidal, wondering why she was put up for adoption, even though if there's such a thing as a perfect adoption, she had it. Her parents are amazing. I adore them. We're extremely close, and but she, that didn't fill that hole, and it wasn't something that they weren't doing. These were two separate things. She needed me. She needed to know who she was. Another thing I'll say is, for years I was really guilty about the fact that I breastfed her, because I thought that made that separation even worse, until I met Nancy many, many years ago. I've known Nancy Gary for many years. And we were at a cub retreat. We put on a retreat every year, and we're sitting around a big bonfire one night, and I was telling her how guilty I felt about breastfeeding my daughter, and how it must have been so much harder for her to separate from me. And she just told me that was the best thing I could have done, because she talked, those of you who heard Nancy speak today, she talked about that, keeping the mother and the baby and the neurons, and there's certain hormonal things that happen right after birth that have to continue, and the fact that I had her for a few days and we had that bonding experience probably helped her more than hurt her, And when I found her, well, I'm going to back up. When I found my oldest daughter, I had to go into mom mode. Again, a lot of birth mothers, when they go through reunion, they go through that mourning period like Denise did.